nominate you.
Hey everybody, this is Nathaniel Provencio, and I'm with my very good friend, Dr. Worster.
Hey everybody.
And we have on the phone today none other than the man, the myth, the legend, the most progressive educator I've ever come across, Alfie Kohn, coming from Boston, Massachusetts. Alfie Kohn, what's going on?
Nice to join you today.
Thank you very much, man.
Alfie, when Nathaniel and I were talking about potential guests, he had a list of like dream guests. Your name was number one. So thank you for making his dream come true.
Well, that's very flattering.
Awesome.
Can you briefly tell us just what's your background, experience, and interest in education? Why go into education versus another field?
Many years ago, I was interested in and writing about topics having to do with both social change and human behavior. My first book was about the destructive effects of competition. I then wrote a book about altruism and empathy, and then another book about the counterproductive effects of using rewards as well as punishments. And I began to think about how it's possible to take those ideas and actually make change and offer actual alternatives to the less productive and respectful aspects of our social order. And that led me to think about schooling. I had done some teaching before that, but I began to learn more about educational theory and practice, and started realizing that, for example, if you're interested in finding an alternative to competition, let's talk about what cooperative learning looks like in a classroom. If you're interested in helping to promote caring and generosity, start with kids and think about the ways that can be done by creating a caring classroom community. If you're thinking about what's wrong with rewards and punishments, well, again, you think about education as a forum in which to work with people instead of doing things to them.
Yep.
That led me increasingly to do more writing and speaking specifically about and in the context of education.
Yeah. I love it. And I think that your work has been very inspiring to the industry. Nathaniel mentioned, he saw,
Yep,
do you live near Boston?
Yes.
Celtics fan?
No, I don't really follow sports, I'm afraid.
Fair enough. I'm personally, they just won the NBA championship. I am from New Hampshire, a little place called Nashua. I'm sure you're familiar with Nashua, New Hampshire.
Yes.
But man, I do love it up there.
Awesome. Alfie, I don't know if you can see this, but I've got this book in my hand right now called, you might be familiar with it. It's a little ditty called The Schools Our Children Deserve, Moving Beyond Traditional Classrooms and Tougher Standards. And when I was a first-year teacher, I went to the Barnes & Noble. Do we even have Barnes & Nobles anymore? And I bought this book and I read it cover to cover. And I was like, man, this is the educator that I want to be. You've written 14 books. Alfie, which one is your favorite?
Oh, that's like asking a parent to pick a favorite child. That one's right up there. It hasn't reached as many readers as a couple of the others have. Even educators don't know about it and therefore recommend one of my other books, and it would be petty for me to suggest they read a different one of their books. I should just be flattered and gratified that they're reading me at all.
Sure.
That book, some 25 years later, I think still captures the ideas of what's wrong with standardized testing and standardized top-down corporate-style school reform, as well as laying out in a classroom setting, very particularly, the difference between traditional forms of pedagogy and curriculum from the kind that treat kids' questions seriously and talk about, I mean, when I see garbage like the so-called science of reading propaganda campaign, I feel like everything old is new again. I laid out the arguments and the research at the time against that, as well as against the more sort of bunch old facts approach to mathematics teaching. So I'm pleased that you're familiar with the book and still talking about it.
Well, absolutely. And it's interesting. Eric and I have both. We've been principals. I was an associate superintendent. My first job was a sub. I was a third grade teacher. I mean, you kind of name it. Between Dr. Worcester and I, we've all done it. And we've seen the pendulum go back and forth. So in 26 years ago, do you see, like, as a nation, are we in education, Alfie, are we doing better? Are we getting closer to the ideal of what John Dewey wrote about so many years ago? Or are we just insanely getting farther and farther from that belief, especially after COVID?
Well, education, as you know well, isn't a single entity, nor is there a single continuum against which you can say that our schools are on that side or this side. I also don't cotton much to the pendulum metaphor, which suggests a kind of historical movement outside of our control and inevitability of it. If we go so far this way, we're going to end up that way, as if it's out of our control. The other reason I don't buy into the pendulum idea is because I don't think it's true, which is the way of answering your primary question in a way that's kind of discouraging, which is, we've never really embraced in a significant way in this culture anything that could be called a student-centered, constructivist, or progressive approach. There have been, and there continue to be, pockets of that with respect to certain issues. I mean, the idea, for example, of students learning from one another in small groups has become more popular, but only to a point, and often only in the service of memorizing facts and practicing skills. But in general, I think things have gotten much worse in terms of the destructive use of educational technology that now takes some of the controlling interventions that are about getting mindless compliance and the memorization of facts, and now does it as a cute app, for example. Or where we once complained about the idea of frequent standardized tests, now we have a kind of, it's not just every few months, it's almost continuous and computerized, which is even worse. We could talk about subfields of education, but certainly in terms of things like classroom management, it's no more democratic or responsive. We don't put kids in the corner on a stool with a dunce cap, and maybe we haven't heard any more lately of specific programs you may remember, like assertive discipline. But now instead there's class dojo and things of that kind, where the goal is still pretty much the same, and we're still fighting some of the same battles against the benighted forces that really are seeing students only as future employees who have to be trained to stop exploring. And the behaviorists have never gone away. They just call themselves by new names now. But there have always been people who refuse to accept this. Teachers and administrators who organize and mobilize and say that doesn't make sense. And the question isn't how to become more efficient at a problematic agenda, but rather to ask the question, why are we doing this at all?
Yeah.
And that's true with that. There is one little sign of hope is that there in the last few years has become a nice little movement under the banner of ungrading to point out that, you know, it doesn't make sense to tweak the grading system and do what's called standards-based grading or something like that.
Yeah.
Grades are inherently problematic, and the question is how you phase them out completely. So there are people on that topic who I think sort of get it. And, you know, if you want to keep talking about this, we can talk about other specific aspects of education and look at promising and discouraging signs.
Yeah.
You know, in any case.
Well, thanks for that. Hold on, because I would love to be able to jump back on that. Dr. Worcester has a question about discipline.
Love to follow up on something you talked about. I do some work supporting classroom management. Again, I know it's a topic you're well versed in. When we talk about management with educators, we try to put it into 3 different categories of skills: knowing your people, having effective procedures, and planning effectively. What do you think about that construct, and what suggestions do you have for our building administrators working to support teachers in classroom management?
Well, my first question is, what do you mean by the word effective that you used twice there?
Yeah.
For example, early research in the field says that the most effective teachers do the following. You know, they take strong control of the classroom in the beginning and then relent only slowly, and they have eyes in the back of their head to know what's going on, et cetera. And you can prove this with studies. Say, see, research shows the most effective classroom management has the following very traditional sounding contours to it. But the question is, what do you mean by effective? And when you look at how that was operationalized in the studies, it meant mindless obedience.
Compliance,
it has
right?
Yeah. The vast majority of programs having to do with classroom management or school discipline or something like that were never intended to help students become independent thinkers or caring members of a community. You know, the god-awful things like PBIS and so on don't help kids because they were never intended to help kids. They were never intended to promote moral sophistication. They were intended to make the kids do whatever they're told.
Yeah.
So if you broaden the question of what we're looking for, the dependent variable, the definition of effective, you end up with very different kinds of practices that involve having the teachers do a lot more asking than telling, that have a lot of class meetings and so on, where kids are not led to focus on specific behaviors, but instead on broad goals of how do we want our classroom to be.
Yeah.
And in fact, I made up a little rule of thumb some years ago. You know, you could call it Kohn's law if you wanted. Nobody's done that so far.
Not yet.
Expect it to happen.
Not yet.
After this.
But if there's a Kohn's law, it will be the value of a resource for teachers is inversely related to the number of times it contains the word behavior.
That's great.
Because when you're talking about behaviors that you can see and measure, you've lost the kids who engage in the behaviors. You're no longer talking about values or reasons or motives. You're just talking about the actions they perform or don't perform. And as soon as you framed it that way and are talking about effective classroom management and behavior stuff, it's inevitable that you're going to end up with techniques that involve, you know, some version of bribes and threats, even if we use euphemisms instead of those words.
So, Alfie, I've got a question for you. And one of the things that I love about your work is that it's very diverse. Not only do you work on education and in school settings, but you also have an aspect to your work about parenting, which I think is outstanding. I'm a parent. I've got 2 kids. So I've got a question for you, especially listening to the rewards and punishments and consequences and the gold stars and all that stuff. But let me ask you this, Alfie, as a parent. All right. So I've got this son. He's 14 years old. I adore him. He's a great kid, hard worker, but I can't get that kid to make his bed. All right. Like, this has been a battle in the Provencio home. And so I'm coming across it from maybe more of a traditional belief. And so I had this conversation with my son. I said, son, listen, I want you to do one thing in the morning to get your day started. I want you to make your bed. And he says, yeah, but I don't really feel like I need to make my bed because like I got to go in there at night and I got to mess it up anyway. So I don't think it's the best use of my time. And so then I was
I'm with him.
But then I said, and then he told me, Alfie, he said, and by the way, Dad, it's my room. And I said, no,
Right.
it's not, because you don't pay rent, brother. You don't pay anything. It's my house, my rules. All I ask you to do is help do this because it sets the tone for a type of discipline that I want you to have. Alfie, am I right? Am I wrong? Come on, brother. Help me out here, man. Help me out.
Well, the broader question here is similar to what I said in response to the last question. It's all about what do we mean by effective? What are our goals? How do we hope our children will turn out in the long run? I begin most of my lectures and workshops by asking audiences of teachers or parents exactly that question. What matters to you most? What do you hope your kids will turn out like years from now? And everywhere I go, I get the same kind of responses. It's remarkable. I want my kid to be happy, ethical, independent thinker, creative, curious, caring.
Big picture stuff. Big picture stuff.
So what I do for a living is to say to people, you say you want this, so why are you doing that? Because here's the research and the logic to show that many of the practices we do as parents and as teachers not only don't promote our long-term goals, but actually get in the way. And so now you have to either persist with whatever it is you're doing, even though they may be counterproductive, even by your own lights.
Sure.
Doesn't matter whether I like them. Or you have to gulp and say, no, I meant it when I said I want my kid to think for himself, to be a good thinker, a lifelong learner, a happy, ethical person, and so on, even if it means I have to rethink reactionary notions like money determines whose room this is. Or I like to make my bed and I'm taller than you or richer, and therefore, God damn it, you're going to make your bed too.
I also don't want him to be a slob. That's an adult.
Well,
some fastidiousness goes a long way.
Compelling him, leaning on this, making it a priority that he keeps his bed the way you like, will not help him to be a self-disciplined person or a neat person, even if that's something that's important to you, which it is not particularly to me. What it will do is erode the quality of your relationship with him and the extent to which he feels respected by you.
Sure.
And given and supported in his autonomy. He goes to school and all day long he's told what to do.
Sure.
Here is one little domain where he thinks he should have the right to keep this area looking the way he wants and to decide how he wants to start his day and which values are important to him. And you're coming along and saying no and appealing, I'm sure in the best possible way and without intending this, to what sounds like a cross between mercenary and totalitarian kinds of reasoning.
Well, you know,
so I would hope
it's good.
If
I mean,
you're
it's
asking
interesting.
the question.
Yeah.
So Nathaniel is never going to share this with the son. He will never share this episode with him.
This episode will not be shared, but I appreciate it. But what I hear you say, Alfie, and this is what I do absolutely agree with, is I think that we devalue our kids ridiculously. And I think that every kid does have value, and every kid should have experienced a sense of autonomy and to be able to see the big picture. So what I got from this and what I'm learning is like, he doesn't have to make his bed my way with hospital corners and all this other shit or whatever that you do. But I want him to come to an understanding that that having some sense of order that he values will give him more empowerment, more engagement, more autonomy on the long run. So I think that's a good point.
Yeah, but I didn't say don't tell him he has to make the bed with hospital corners. I'm asking, why in the world would he have to make his bed at all?
Busted, Nathaniel. You're busted.
Well,
I mean,
That's a good point.
if you're concerned about a sense of,
My wife makes me make my bed every single morning. So
So
happy wife,
your
happy life.
boss. It's your
well,
boss.
let's pivot to your marriage then. You know, but or let me put it this way. You know, I'm sure you're tongue in cheek here, but if your wife expects this of you, and on some level you find yourself wondering why, the last thing you want to do is turn around and do to others what was done to you.
Sure.
How many teachers feel micromanaged and disrespected and de-skilled by their administrators, and then turn around through classroom management and treat their students exactly the way they were treated, rather than the way they wish they had been treated?
Yeah, yep. It's a great point. Well, my wife, Dr. Worcester, will be watching this episode.
Fantastic. She will love that. Alfie, I appreciated your recent blog, The Siren Song of Evidence-Based Research. I know you've also written about EduSpeak before, and how some institutional jargon can be needed while some can be off-putting. It does seem, I know Prevents, you mentioned the pendulum thing, but it does seem like in education we do have certain terms that we do like latch onto from time to time that quickly become adopted as a new standard. You referenced one earlier. Should we be skeptical of these new catch-all concepts, like things that are, quote, evidence-based or the science of this? And I guess the other part of the question is, what role do you think confirmation bias plays in anyone looking to apply new areas of research?
Well, that last part is a whole show in its own right, and I'm not sure how to wrap my arms around that universally. With respect to the first part of the question, yeah, I don't think teachers need that much help in rolling their eyes when they hear the latest bit of jargon. Sometimes it sounds sort of corporate style, and sometimes it's just sort of meaningless, and other times it's, you know, we implement with fidelity, you know, as an example that just means do exactly what you're told and do not show any professional judgment or else. Other terms I used to like. The words had some meaning and suggested a thoughtful and I think sometimes respectful approach to being with kids, but gradually have become co-opted so that the terms now mean something else. I talked years ago about the importance of focusing on the learning that's happening rather than the teaching.
Of course.
But now I hear that very phrase being used by people, but it turns out what they mean by learning is just cramming forgettable facts into short-term memory. Or we talk about things that are developmentally appropriate or developmental approaches, which had a significant meaning and a good meaning. That means, you know, you are mindful of the capacity and the age of the students you're asking to do something. But now developmentally oriented kinds of teaching just means making your way up an adult constructed ladder, where at best the kid just has a little say about which task I'm doing when, but no meaningful autonomy or chance to participate in thinking about the curriculum itself. So it's a lot of the terms, the edubabble stuff I wrote about in that blog post, is just stuff that sort of gets under my skin because of the language that's used. But more of our time should be spent not on the terms, but on the underlying goals and constructs. It doesn't matter what you call it if what's going on in the classroom is not really about thinking, but just memorizing. It doesn't matter what you call it or how you tweak it or which managerial expressions you use to sell it if classroom management is really about doing things to kids. Even if you're, you know, and so on. So again, I always want to go back to not only what's the goal and what do we mean by effective, but also what's happening here. To what extent is this school asking the question, what do these kids need, and how can we meet those needs? As opposed to asking the question, how do we get the kids to do whatever we're telling them to do?
Yeah, Alfie, I've got a little bit of a question for you. It's a bit of a political question.
Okay.
There is a huge movement to school choice movement, voucher movement, moving
Yes.
money to open up charter schools. All right,
Yep.
I'm just curious about this. So let's say you've got a quote unquote traditional school in Boston,
Yeah.
that is operating in a traditional mindset that in your understanding is not student centered. It's very, not, kind of like that, the whole thing that we've been talking about, the problem. And a charter school opens up across the street that is based on a constructivism approach that's going to allow kids to explore, do what they need to do. And then those students at that public school have first dibs to go right across the street and go to the John Dewey Education Center. That's
Yep.
that
Yep.
magnet
Yep.
school.
Yep.
Do you support that? Do you not support that?
Well, first of all, the number of charter schools that are Dewey-esque is very, very slim. They do exist,
Sure.
and among progressives, there has long been a conversation about whether there's some role for charter schools. Whenever I tend to speak too sweepingly and discouragingly about the charter school movement, I do think of people like the late Ted Sizer, who opened a charter school with his wife Nancy that is absolutely terrific. And I have been to some in California and elsewhere where I'm really impressed with what they've done. Those charter schools, by the way, tend to be small-scale affairs, one-offs that are opened by a group of parents or teachers with a dream, whereas the vast majority of charter schools are chartered by much larger educational service organizations
Sure.
and for-profit groups,
Sure.
as if they're opening a chain of car washes.
Right.
So the first distinction to be made is who's opening the charter schools and for what purpose. The second question is, I guess we can look at the nature of the particular charter school, and yeah, I'm going to look twice if it's really a student-centered approach as opposed to the ghastly no excuses version
Right.
of charter schools that predominate, especially in the cities, which are like boot camps, and
Sure.
just I wouldn't send my dog to one of those.
Mm.
So another distinction, though, is to look at it in the broader context of, is it truly a public school? Are there other ways to offer meaningful choice, like pilot schools that aren't charter, like my friend Debbie Meyer opened in New York and then in Boston, where they were pilot, they were not charter schools, and they provided very progressive alternatives, and that makes sense. But so while I will grudgingly admit that there are examples of charter schools where I'm interested and I'm not going to condemn them just because they're charters,
Sure.
the big picture is that the charter school and especially voucher movement these days is based historically and currently on three imperatives. One is destroying the entire public sector, not
Sure.
only public education, but is often propounded by people who also want to undermine the democratic public sector in favor of the market sector for everything, privatizing everything from Social Security to prisons to healthcare. The second thing driving it is racism, since the voucher movement began to create segregation academies so that white kids wouldn't have to be near kids of color. That's a historical fact. And there's still aspects of that. And the third thing driving the voucher movement, not so much the charter school movement, is theocracy, the desire to take public money in violation of the Establishment Clause of the First Amendment and use it specifically to support religious indoctrination.
Sure.
Vouchers are an amalgam of all three of those things. Charters give sort of centrists and Democrats a way to support some of those goals that aren't great for democratic public schooling, but not go as far as the ultra-right-wing vouchers do.
Yeah, I was just really, really interested, Alfie, on your thoughts on that, because it's such a, like vouchers right now, at least the conversation about it is a bit of a zeitgeist, and it's very interesting. So I appreciate your thoughts and ponderings on that. Dr. Worcester?
Sure.
So Alfie, what kinds of things and you've been working in education reform for a while. What kinds of things do you think are moving more towards your educational worldview?
Well, I'm not sure I have too much to add to what I said at the beginning of our conversation. One example that I see some progress in is challenging grading, aspects of certain kinds of cooperative learning, I guess. I guess I would need prompting to think of other things where I can say, yay, we're sure making progress here, because most of it I see is either more of the same or in some respects getting worse.
Yeah.
Many aspects of traditional education are not defended explicitly. It's just that they backed down.
Alfie, are there school systems? We hear a lot about Finland. We hear a lot about Singapore. I hear a lot about Japanese schools. Are there school districts school systems in the world that actually get it right from start to finish? Does anyone get it right?
I don't have a single model to point to. Finland, I think, stands out of the examples. I mean, I haven't heard anything about Singapore that seems like that's, in many respects, it seems to be a cautionary tale. A lot of things I've heard about Finland seem promising. I haven't been there, for early childhood education. I haven't made my pilgrimage yet to the Reggio Emilia schools in northern Italy, but people who have tell me they feel they've died and gone to heaven. There are specific, I'm more in favor of starting with the idea that makes sense, which may be one aspect of schooling. Let's just talk about primary level math, or let's just talk about what a high school could look like, or let's just talk about assessment, and then see the classrooms, sometimes the whole school, sometimes if you're lucky, the whole district, rarely the whole state or country.
Oh, yeah, sure.
Where you think you have something to learn from, and then visit and learn from them, as opposed to a futile, quixotic search for a place that's got it all right, where all we have to do is clone them.
Yeah.
So I haven't found the latter to be realistic, and I haven't found it to be a particularly useful model of trying to make change. I have traveled all over the place writing about, more often, amazing teachers, more often than an amazing whole district or country, and then describing in granular detail what I see that makes me so happy.
Yeah.
And then saying, that's, I think, where we want to go with respect to this issue.
So this is going to be a really real tough question for you, Alfie. Okay, you ready?
All right.
What's your favorite episode of The Wire?
Or character?
It would come from season 1 or season 3, probably. I don't know if you're nudging me in favor of the season 4, which was about schooling, which was amazing.
That's right. It was. That's what I was hoping you would go for.
Yeah, but I that's not the only lens through which I look at the world or television, but it was an extraordinary series, to be sure. Was that really going to be your last question?
Hell yeah, that's a great question. Oh, that's great. That's great. Alfie, listen, brother, you're the rage against the machine of education, and we need more voices like you to counter the voices that are out there. I'm not going to say I agree with everything that you say, but I totally agree with the conversation needing to happen and challenging some of these traditional beliefs. And Alfie, I just want to say Godspeed to you, sir, for doing what you're doing. You're a blessing and an asset to this profession. So I want to thank you for that.
Oh, well, I appreciate those kind words and your collective, the both of you, and your interest in these topics and openness to somebody who's asking the root questions instead
That's
of
great.
how do we do the status quo a little better?
That's
and
right.
If anybody listening to this is interested in more, my website has all my articles and blog posts for free, as well as information about my books.
And your website is?
It's my name, Alfie Kohn, AlfieKohn.org.